this is going to be a game changer on how you're going to be working with your transitions, because it will help you to come up with unlimited transition ideas for your tracks. So for those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Vlad and I create superstar music producers. If you're interested in coaching and you want to work on your music production skills, all the links down below. Feel free to book a call with me or send me a message on Instagram. And without further talking, let's get straight into the video. So let's take a look at the whole thing. So I created a super simple mind map when it comes to making transitions for your songs. And I have split everything into a couple of categories here. So there are a couple of core elements for any transition in any electronic dance music song. So we can either add something or subtract. So we can add or take something out. So there will be 4 categories for addition and subtraction. So I'm going to be showing you examples in Ableton for each one, so you can see how you can put this into practice. So let's start with number 1, addition. So transition core elements. Let me zoom in. So when it comes to changing a timbre of the sound, this is one of the ways how you can make your transitions more interesting. You can add more tension. And here are just a couple of examples. Obviously, there are a lot of them, but I listed the most common ones. And once you understand the concept, you'll be able to come up with your own ideas. But let me give you a couple of examples. So let's say we want to change the timbre. We could add a new instrument. We could add a new layer to the existing sound. We can add noise sweeps. We can add reverb, delay tails, and something like that. We can do synth automation and basically like any effects or anything that would change the sound. So let's jump back to Ableton, and I'm gonna show you the track and show you what you can do. So we have a track which sounds like this. It's one of the tracks that I'm working on, not finished yet. So some sort of like ethnic, organic, tech house vibe. So to show you what you can do with timbre changes. So for example, let's say we have a synthesizer, and just before the end of the loop, we want to make a transition, right? So we can do something like this. Super simple example, but you should get the point. Right, so this is what you can do. So let me play the whole loop for you, so you're gonna hear how it will sound. And then if you follow the same formula, you can do this pretty much for any of the synthesizers. Right, so it's already giving us some movement, some variation, some even like a bit of tension, because we are opening the sound, we are making the sound brighter, right? So let's jump back and see what else we could do. So again, we could manipulate the synthesizer, so work with all different parameters, change that. We can, you can see, we can add reverb and delay tails. So for example, what we can do here is we can automate the reverb, and that's gonna count as a timbre change, right? I'll be giving you some examples here with some of the finished tracks once we finish with each category. So let's take a look at this. What we are going to do, we're going to automate the amount of reverb, right? So let me do like this. Is it this one? Yes. Okay. So obviously that was a little bit too much, but this is something that you could do. Right, so this is one of the examples. So let me find a track that will show you something similar, right? So I think it was this one, if I'm not mistaken. Right, so just listen to the lead sound, because I'm using the same approach. I'm closing the filter. Right, right? So you heard how I used the reverb. So there was definitely some like reverb automation like this. There was also similar synth automation. And this is just, you know, one of millions of examples that you can do to make cool transitions, right? So let me show you one more thing that you can do. So let's jump back. We could talk about layering, right? So we could pretty much layer the same sound. Let me try and use the last, I mean not layer the same sound, but the same melody, right? So we can layer like this. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. We need to play this one. So just take a listen to how the layering will sound, like what kind of impact it will add to the sound. Right, so it definitely gives something. We could layer other instruments as well, just to give you another example of I think. Right, so you can pretty much layer with anything like a synthesizer, a live recorded instruments, but that's one of the things that you can do. So we can either like layer the sound itself. We can say we can copy this sound, right? And then we can add, let me show you another one. Lead sound, right? So it should be lead main, right? So I can resample this part at the end, just like this. And then I could put like a whole lot of distortion onto this sound, and that will make the sound different, right? So let me just give you a quick example, and then we're going to talk about the next topic, right? So let me do something, you know, pretty simple, something like this, right? Let me solo. So it could be as simple as that, right? Let me play this part for you. So that's already giving you some difference, right? So I don't think I need to go like through every single example. It's more like about the approach, what you can do. So one of the categories is obviously going to be the timbre, right? So let's talk about the next thing when it comes to making transitions. So you can change the harmony of the sound. So you can add layers, you can add chords, you can add atmospheres, you can make your notes longer, you can add or change chords. Let me give you some examples that we could use for that. So one of the things that I did is I changed the melody just at the end of this loop. Let's bypass this one, because this one is a bit different. And this one, it gives you another variation of the same melody. And this is something that you can use at the end here, right? So also something really, really useful. And it's really simple as well, right? So you don't need to do a lot. One of the other things that you could do for this is you could change the note length. Let me show that for you. And then we can make the notes longer. And for example, we can even increase the length of the synthesizer. I mean, like the envelope, right? So we can add some decay time like this. Let's say that's gonna be, and maybe we can close the filter back, right? Because it becomes a little bit too much. So something like this. Because it changes the sound, right? So the most important thing when it comes to a good transition is changing the sound over time. Let me also show you a presentation so it makes a bit more sense. So when it comes to timbre change examples, so as I've just shown you in Ableton, you can open a synth filter, you can add a new layer. Basically, what we are trying to achieve is to have some change over time. So change over time equals to tension, and they're basically going to be two variations. You can either make the sound brighter, or you can make it darker. So exactly as I've shown you in Ableton, bright sounds will give you more tension. Dark sounds will give you less tension. This is really, really important to understand. Okay, so let's jump back and let's see what other ways we can work with the harmony or the melody, right? So for example, you can add more notes. You can either change the mood or do melodic fills. Let me show you what I mean by a melodic fill. So I think it was this track. So I'm going to show you a melodic fill. Listen to the breakdown, and here we will have a melodic fill, and this will count as a change in the harmony. So let me show you here. Right, so this is a melodic fill, and you can use it just before the drop, maybe as well at the end of here, right? So I could have layered different sounds here. I think I had something similar if we take a look at this part. So again, like the concept is the same. So listen to this one here. Right, so again, it's the same logic, having melodic fills, having some harmony, melody variations. You can add pads, you can add atmospheres. For example, if we listen to this track, one of the previous ones, you're gonna hear that I use drone strings. It's like a violin, but a synthesizer. You can hear sort of like this violent sound. Again, this is one of the examples of how you can use harmony variation to make better transitions, right? So melodic fills, changing the mood, making notes longer, change the chords. So let me find another example that we could use for that. I think there was one really, really good example, probably somewhere here, right? So what I did here, listen to how I'm changing the melody. I'm changing sort of the vibe of the track. Right, so here it sounds like a completely different part. So I'm gonna make this one pink. Here we had a little pause and a melodic fill basically. And here we had a completely different melodic vibe, if I can say so, right? So again. I'm changing the timbres as well. I'm closing the filter on the drums, right? So this is again what something that is happening. So it's the same logic as here, but the only difference is we just go down, right? That's sort of the only difference. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, again, for the harmony, that's pretty simple. So you just have to play around a little bit. So listen to reference tracks, and then this cheat sheet, it will help you a lot because it basically just breaks down everything into something like very, very simple. Okay. So that's for the harmony, what changes. Now let's talk about the effects. So for effects, it's gonna be pretty simple. So reverbs, saturation, distortion, delays, any creative effects we could count as the effect thing. We could also open filters, and then don't forget about the automation, right? So let's jump back to the project here. And I'm just thinking what track I could use as an example. We could use this one. This one is really good. So I want to show you specifically the breakdown here. So the lead sound is very closed, and pay attention to how I'm using the reverb, I'm using the filters, and I'm utilizing pauses. We can check from here. I'm using the noise sweep, which helps me to transition to the break. The energy also goes down because I'm taking away some elements. Right, so here, if we take a look at the mind map, so I used the timbre change, I used rhythm change, I used I think no harmony, at least not to a big extent, and then effects. So I opened the filter on the synthesizer, I automated the reverb, I utilized pauses, and then I think in terms of like melody, I think I didn't change that much. So it's pretty much simple. But for the effects, most likely you would just need to automate and then just think creatively, how can I use the effects? So right now we are talking about addition, but there's also subtraction, and I will talk about that in a moment as well, because it's also really, really important. So let me show you some other examples if there's anything that I can show you. Yeah, I think this one is also going to be a good example. So if we take a look at the, so here I'm adding new harmony layers. So there's the atmosphere. So if we look at this one, I'm utilizing the harmony change right now. What else? There's also rhythm change, because here we had sort of the full drum loop, and here I'm just using like the snap thing. There's also effects like filter automation, reverb automation. Again, rhythm variation. So you can see how you can put this together. Why I really, really like this mind map, because it just gives you a lot of ideas visually. You will be able to understand. Okay, so if I'm listening to my track, what is it the thing that I can change now? Is it effects? Is it harmony? Is it rhythm? Is it timbre? It's basically just 1, 2, 3, 4 categories. And when you understand the logic, it becomes like really, really simple to make transitions, right? So we talked about effects, we talked about harmony, we talked about the timbre. Now let's talk a little bit about the rhythm variation. So basically, when it comes to the rhythm, it's one of the most simple ones. Sometimes can be not as simple, but basically you can change tempo, you can add drum fills, you can add rhythm layers, you can add any rhythmic change. For example, we can change the notes in our drum loop, something like that, right? So when it comes to using drum loops, I think I'm just trying to think what was a good track example. We can take a listen to this one. This is again like a rhythmic change. I'm just adding new rhythm layers. In this case, it's percussion. Pay attention to the effects and to the automation. Also, if you listen to this part, I have more drum elements like cymbals, because in the beginning, in the drop, because the energy is not as high, here I don't have any drums at all, right? Here I don't have the cymbals, so it's also one of the ways to add more harmonic not harmonic, but rhythmic variation, right? So I hope it all makes sense. And now let me show you more examples with the actual loop that we can do. So this is the timbre change. I hope it makes sense for you now. What I want to talk about specifically is understanding different transition types, because generally they're going to be two transition types. One is going to be the transition before the main drop, and this is the transition that we have. Let me give you an example. I think it could be this track. No, sorry, it's another one. It's this one. Yeah. And this is an example of a transition which comes before the drop, right? So I'm gonna give you another one with this track. Right, so if we come back to this transition, it requires the most contrast because we are transitioning from different parts of the track. It has to be epic, and it's very important to keep the energy going, because if you mess up the energy, right, if you have too much bass, if you use the effects in the wrong way, it's just not going to work really that well, right? So this is why it's really, really important. Let me show you another one. This is also going to be a really good example for you to listen and then try to understand what kind of effects I'm using. So I used reverb automation, I used harmony variation, there was a drawing sound, I used rhythmic variation, again taking out or adding new drum loops. So really a lot of things that I used in here, right? So this is one of the examples, but there are also a bit simpler version of a transition. So let's listen to this one. This is a micro transition, something that I would describe like this. So we have just like a little bit of intensity here, right? So intensity pretty much remains the same. So it doesn't require like huge energy contrast change. It's used for variations. It's great for repetitive tracks to do those micro variations. It sometimes can be epic depending on the structure of the track. And when it comes to these transitions, you can really do a lot of them. So this transition was really, really useful because it helped us to have that a little bit of contrast, right? Listen to the lead sound, how it changes over time. This was another example of a micro transition. And then I can show you like literally a lot of these. If you listen to this one. This is also micro transition. So the biggest difference is in intensity. So if we look at this one, intensity just goes up. If you look at the micro transition, intensity remains the same, right? So I hope it makes sense. And yeah, as we talked, we basically have like 4 key elements, and I've shown you some of the examples already. So let me show you some illustrations of harmony change examples. Let's say that we have a major melody and we have it in the build-up. And then we can introduce a dark melody and have a dark melody in the drop. In this example, this will make a dramatic mood change and contrast and tension, right? So this is how you can use melodic variation. This is another example. So let's say we have a melody in the build-up. And then just before the drop hits, we add chords. And then in the main drop, we have the chords and the melody. So if you look at the tension and the energy levels, this one just goes up, right? So again, it can be as simple as that. Then I could give you another illustration. So as you heard in some of my tracks, we had a melody here, and the drop can remain pretty much the same. But just before the drop, to add more contrast or like some variation in harmony, we can do a melodic fill. So let me show you an example that we could use for that. So there will be a pretty cool example which sounds like this. Right, so this is rhythmic variation, and this is melodic fill, right? And this is also part of that. So if we go back to the presentation, and this is exactly what happened in the track. So we can just rename it, say that this is the build-up, but essentially it's the same logic, right? So we had the main drum loop, and then I added a snare roll before the drum. So this is one of the examples how you can use that. Maybe you're gonna add like a percussion loop with some effects, with something like that. It doesn't really matter what you do, it's more about the logic. So you can either subtract or you can add something to the track. So it's really as simple as that. Or maybe you can just remove the drums. So let's just go back and let's listen to the loop here, right? So we can play this loop. Right, so here I just used reverb automation, synth filter automation, and that was pretty much it, right? So that was, again, like another example. Then, just to put everything visually for you, we can also use effects. So this is, again, another example. It follows the same logic as with synth automation. So we are just opening, not opening, but we can add more distortion, we can add more reverb. It could be like any effect, right? So it's just like a different category, but again, the logic remains the same. So we can either do something, let me put back the decay time. And then I'm gonna show you what we can do with effects. So for example, let's say that we want to use, let's delete the automation. And then for example, we can add, let's say that's gonna be distortion. And we can add a little bit of distortion at the end. Right, so again, like one of the examples how you can do things. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So what we are trying to achieve is contrast. That's the most important part of any transition, any track. So before we end with this video, let's go through everything one final time. So there are two ways to work with, like two core elements of a transition. So we can either add something or we can subtract something. And we use that to achieve contrast. So we can add timbre, right? We can add new instruments, layering, noise sweeps, reverb, delay tails, synth automation, and basically any effects that change the timbre of the sounds. For example, like change a waveform in the synthesizer, right? So if I would do that, that would count as well. We could change the rhythm. So we can add rhythmic layers, we can add drum fills, we can change the tempo, so anything that relates to rhythm. So just making the rhythm more complex. We can change harmony, we can add layers, we can add atmospheres, we can add more notes, melodic fills, change the mood as well. That's gonna give you like a lot of free space to experiment. We can make notes longer, and we can also add, remove chords. And finally, the effects. So we can open filter, parallel processing, add reverb, add delay, add distortion, automation, and all things like that, right? So that's for the addition. For subtraction, pretty much the same thing. So you need to understand, are you going up or are you going down? So if you're going down, then you may want to subtract some elements. So if that's going to be effects, we can close the filter, we can reduce the amount of reverb delay, or we can do the fade out with volume. For the rhythm, we can simplify the pattern, we can remove layers, and so on. For harmony, same thing. Again, we can change the chords, we can remove notes, we can simplify melodic elements, we can make notes shorter. And for timbre, We can remove or fade out effects. We can remove sound or instruments or fade out any layers or sounds. So that's like pretty much it. My final advice would be to listen to more reference tracks and then use this mind map as a cheat sheet, because really they're just 4 categories, and once you understand the logic, it becomes really easy, so you will be able to make your own transitions. So this mind map is available for download in case you want to use it as a cheat sheet. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I hope that you guys learned something new from this video. And please, if I have forgotten to cover something, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any additional questions, if you have any follow-up questions, or any ideas on what I could add, maybe make one more video about transitions again. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one.